Everybody who understands the details realizes that sanctions, international pressure, are much preferred to using military action. Military action is, by everybody's agreement, the least bad, the last resort, the last thing you do if you have no other choice. If Iran can be brought, the Iranian leadership and the Iranian public can be brought to their senses to realize that what they're doing is unacceptable for all the reasons that we've been talking about, then there will be no need for use of military action. But if there's no other choice, the one has to weigh the two options of doing nothing versus what might be a limited response or might, in fact, have a lot longer impact. Let's remember that you said that the Iranian nuclear program goes back to 1979. In fact, it goes back to some degree to the days of the Shah. It goes back 5, 6, 7 years before that.
All right. Sorry to interrupt you. I really need to...
One other quick point, and that is that it was dependent on imported technology. It was dependent on imported expertise, particularly from the former Soviet Union. It's not completely clear that they can replicate that. So while I do not advocate military action, I also think that saying that it would be useless is an exaggeration.
Well, that's a very important point because, Tom Will, I would like you to respond to that particular point. Other people are saying, well, let's do and stick to issues of sanctions, diplomacy, and other intelligence-led operations as opposed to military strike. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's very accurate, for the point I made earlier, that if you unleash military activity, bombing, and it goes backwards and forwards, you're going to decimate the whole of the Middle East. My favorite point is that if Iran has nothing to hide, if it wants to play according to the rules, it has a good example in the case of South Africa.
Let me go to Philip Msinga. Hello, Philip. Thank you for holding for me.
Yes, Xolani.
Go ahead,
please. You're going to give me time. Xolani, firstly, you must remember that I want to remind this gentleman, Professor Steinberg, that their lies have come to be realized by the whole world. One, George W. Bush declared Iraq, Iran, and many other countries as evils of axis that needs to be eliminated and annihilated, those nations. Then we saw that they went into Iraq, destroyed the peaceful community there, and just brought the whole society of Iraq into mess. Look what Pakistan is today because of their collaboration with the United States. You must also recall that during the war in Angola, it was the same United States that passed on biological warheads straight to racist Israels. And the racist Israels brought them to South Africa to reinforce the apartheid army regime, to wipe off our boys who were fighting in Angola. Today, we are being told that the same country, Israel, which possesses dangerous nuclear weapons, that other nations who are particularly not classified as whites cannot accelerate their knowledge in the scientific field, hence must be exterminated. I think time has come for particularly us in Africa and other members of the world community who are progressive to say, let us allow these cowboys to go and ignite war in Iran, and we must join hands with Iran and embark on the third world war to bring civilization to ourselves. Because if we only complain to these people must also pay with their blood in order to understand that Philip, we don't want this type of domination.
That's Philip Msinga. Thank you very much. Professor, I wanted to talk to you, Professor Essack, a little bit earlier on about your thoughts on the sanctions, on diplomacy, and other intelligence-led initiatives.
Firstly, I think that all attempts must always be undertaken to avert war. I think the deep tragedy when we fall into this trap about singling out one country as the demon, we see this now happening in the case of Iran, the demonization of Iran and all this focus on Iran. It loses sight of the fact that there are ordinary human beings there. Mothers and fathers, children, parents, people just struggling to survive. All of those people become completely nameless. They become non-human for us in all of this war talk. And so this whole idea of just attack and prepare for war and so on, this is absolutely horrific. It goes against the grain of what it means to be human. And so all attempts must always be made to avert war. If this is the case, then yes. If sanctions is a means of averting war, yes. It must, however, also be pointed out that for many of us, Iran is not the heart of the problem. And I'm glad that Professor Steinberg agrees at least on the question of sanctions. I mean, I, for example, am a firm believer in the question of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, because I do think that so much of the instability in the Middle East comes from the Israeli regime and the policies that it follows towards the indigenous Palestinian people. But at the end of the day, it isn't a question about Israel must be wiped off the map and Iran is going to be doing it. I think all forms of nuclear weapons are wrong. The thousands that the United States possesses, the hundreds that Israel possesses, and also the one that Iran may possibly be attempting to possess. I think all of that is wrong.
Professor Steinberg, let me bring you back in. Because we're wrapping up here now, but I would like us to look in the long term. What should we be striving for in that region?
In the long term, we need to stop the kind of irrational hatred that we just heard from Professor Essack, to understand that the Jewish people have a historic right. We've been in this land for 4,000 years. We have the same right in our land as South African peoples have in their land. What he's advocating is a form of apartheid. I can't believe that someone from South Africa is advocating that kind of racial hatred against the Jewish people in their national
calling for a non-racial state where Arabs and Jews and Christians, secular believers and non-believers, all of them will live together in a single land where God has not handed down this.
All right.
You're calling this racism?
Professor Steinberg.
Bringing this back to me.
So say what again, Professor Steinberg? You were saying something?
That when Iranian representatives in any forum, and I've been in these kinds of meetings, where Iranian representatives refuse to shake hands or to acknowledge the humanity of their Israeli counterparts and their colleagues, that's racism. So I would hope that people in South Africa who have experienced racism will understand that it's Israel that's the victim of racism.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, and I would like you to respond to this particular one.
On Iran, we have to confront here what is the reality, which is a violation of international law.
But Professor Steinberg, when you say Professor Essack, for instance, is using hatred and so on, are you referring to him questioning Israeli policies? Is that racism?
Well, we just heard from him in his support of what he calls boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. These campaigns to wipe Israel off the map are fundamentally racist. They refuse to acknowledge the right of the Jewish people to self-determination. The main problem in the Middle East is that everybody hates everybody else. There is more hatred in this region than any place else in the world. Sunni and Shia. We've had between rich and poor. We see it. We see it in Egypt. We see it in Syria. We see it in Gaddafi. We see dictatorships. We see the hatred of women, the discrimination against women in Saudi Arabia. Those are the real problems. And what all of these regimes and dictators and their supporters have done is created an image of Israel to divert attention. Let's stop attacking Israel. Israel is not the problem.
When we in South Africa, in the African National Congress and in the Pan-Africanist Congress called upon the world to divest from South Africa, we did not do so because of our hatred for white people in South Africa or for our desire to see the death of South Africa. We were driven by a desperation to see a non-racial society where, let me finish. I'm not going to be shut up again in our country we've been shut up for many, many years by white people. I'm not going to be shut up by a white person again. And so our call was a call for a non-racial democracy where every human being, regardless of his race, regardless of his color, regardless of his religion, where every person would have a place under the sun, and where we're not going to live into a country that God had set aside for a particular ethnic group. We weren't going to reduce this country to a piece of real estate. All of South Africa for all of God's people. This was a vision that was good enough for our country.
All right,
no reason why it shouldn't be good enough for Israel.
Comment a little, because I'm wrapping up now. Tom Wheeler, maybe you'll give me your thoughts on this. I hope you will come.
Well, I think we've unfortunately, in spite of what the professor says, descended into a racist argument here, and I much regret it because I think that the debate has become totally irrational, and I don't think I can really contribute anything to it.
You know, Professor Steinberg, I just would like to get something out of you as we wrap up, because does the view of a military intervention reflect what the Israelis on the ground are saying?
Absolutely not. Israel does not want, in any form, any kind of military threat. The question is, what are the alternatives to do that? We are threatened by Hezbollah rockets. Tens of thousands of rockets are based in southern Lebanon aimed at Israelis. Those are all Iranian rockets. There are rockets flying from Gaza attacking Israeli citizens, civilians, today. Look at your newspapers. Look at your television. Many of those are manufactured in Iran. Israel does not want to have a military confrontation and doesn't want to be the target of these kinds of attacks.
All right, gentlemen, I really have got to end it
here.
The
international community to say to Iran, blow the whistle, stop doing these illegal acts, and then there will not be a military confrontation.
All right, to all of you, I really have got to end it right here. Professor Farid Essack with me here in the studio from the Center for the Study of Democracy at UJ, as well as Professor Gerald Steinberg, President of the NGO-Monitor, live on the line from Jerusalem, and Tom Wheeler of the South African Institute of International Affairs. We've got to end it here. It's an emotional discussion, clearly, but I hope that you were able to pick out at least some facts or some issues that you would want to take away from this particular discussion.